welcome to our first Porch Chat of 2020 and to our first virtual Porch Chat ever. My name is Julie Thompson. I work for the Waterloo Region Crime Prevention Council and I'm a friend of crime prevention. We are hosting this event as part of the Keep Families Safe campaign, which seeks to prevent violence in the region of Waterloo. We are part of a growing coalition of municipalities and agencies that recognize that the added stress and isolation of COVID-19 has increased situations of family violence and has limited people's opportunity to access help. Our campaign is designed to raise awareness, to let people know how to access support, and to equip family, friends, and others to recognize signs of violence and how to offer help. We are really happy today to have with us Christina Silva and Lisa Nice from Women's Crisis Services. Our topic today is understanding emotional abuse and precursors to violence in the home. And we are located in the original governor's house or warden's house of our original jail. And so the house is this sort of Victorian house with this great big beautiful porch. And so part of the work that we do is engage community around community building activities towards crime prevention. And so we have these informal porch chats. And the idea is to for people to get to know each other and to understand more about different topics and then to get involved in bringing that information back to their community. I'm pleased to hand over the screen to Christina and Lisa. Thank you very much.
Hey, so I'm Lisa and this is Christina. So this is the first time we've been part of a porch chat, and unfortunately we're doing it virtually because of what's going on in our world today. But if we weren't doing it virtually, people from Australia wouldn't be able to join us. So I guess there's a positive with that. So Christina and I are both outreach workers at Women's Crisis Services, and I'm going to share a little bit about our agency for those of you that aren't aware, and we're going to start a PowerPoint. You can see the PowerPoint as we're going. Okay, so again, our topic today is understanding emotional abuse and the precursors to violence in the home. So first off, we'll tell you a little bit about our agency and some of the programs that we offer at the shelters. So our agency is called Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region, and we consist of two shelters. One is located in Cambridge, and the other one in Kitchener is called Anselma House. So we have both Haven House and Anselma House. So within those programs, the programs are actually exactly the same at each shelter. So we have a residential program that consists of, we have 42 beds in each shelter. That's right? 42 beds in each shelter. And we are often at full capacity with people calling daily from our 24-hour crisis line, which we always also have to get into the shelter. So within the shelter, women have their own bedrooms. It's almost like a hotel kind of setting in their room, like they have their own bathroom, shower, bathtub, a closet. Depending on the family size, there's beds and always a desk. So they have their own space. Not all shelters are like that. Many shelters in other regions, women and children have to share bedrooms with other people. We are very lucky and fortunate in this region that we do not have to do that. So both shelters each have a food and nutrition worker that what their job is to prepare meals for the women and children that stay in our shelter. So women, of course, have their own. We have a commercial kitchen in both shelters. However, women also have their own type of kitchen that they can cook things if they don't like what we're serving, or for lunches and breakfast. They make their own meals or on weekends. So that's kind of the idea there. We have child and youth workers at each shelter that run programs for the children that live within the shelter. Some of them are play groups. Some of them could be psychoeducational groups. It's all kind of determined on the amount of women and children and the ages of the children that are in the shelters. They will also help women with some parenting advice or support if they need it. We are also very lucky that we have a psychologist that comes into each shelter twice a week that will work with women on some of the trauma they've experienced in their life, and that can be both historical and current trauma. We also have 2 clinical workers that work within the shelter that provide counseling to the women that are in our shelter. So we have many programs. We also have a fairly, new program in the shelter that we have a music therapist that comes a couple times a week again to each shelter. So we're kind of lucky in the way that we have many resources for women and children that come into our shelter. It's still community living for them, so there is still challenges and still difficulties, but we do provide a safe place. Throughout this presentation, we're also going to talk about some of the things that have happened with us since COVID-19. So at the beginning of COVID-19, our numbers at the shelter dropped, which was actually very concerning for us, right? We knew that it was difficult for women to reach out, to maybe make the calls. People were working at home. We were isolated. So it was a big challenge for us to continue to provide the service. So when they were coming into the shelter, of course, because we had concerns, they had to also quarantine themselves for a couple of weeks when they came into the shelter till we made sure that they didn't have COVID-19, because we did not want to bring it into our shelter. So that also posed a challenge to our shelter system. However, what I can say now, as things have been opening up in our community, our shelters are both now at almost full capacity. So, which is typically where we run on a normal day. So right now we have women and children at both shelters that are in isolation, but our numbers are full. So we guessed that this was going to start to happen the more and more we opened up and the more that women could reach out for support. So that in fact is happening. So we don't just have a residential program. Christina and I are both outreach workers, and I'll let her tell you a bit more about her job in a moment. So currently we have 6 outreach workers working from both Haven House and Selma House. And we work with women who are in the community. So some of the women just want information from us, which is fine. So we can provide education with women that are maybe still living with the person that's abusive. They may want to leave or they may not, right? And so that is their decision, and it's not Christina or I's decision. So we kind of work with them where they're at. And I always tell them that it's their journey and that I'm simply here to support them in their journey. So we've also provide safety planning tools for women. We do that with, I would say, every woman that we work with. And we also do a risk assessment that's called the DBDRC that Christina is going to talk to you a little bit more about as we go on. So we also help women find housing. We support them just maybe in their daily lives with crises that may arise. We help them find legal support with lawyers. We can liaison with lawyers and the women, help them get legal aid. We kind of tailor the program to each individual's needs. So it's kind of not hard and fast. We have learned to be fairly flexible in the way we deliver service. So I have to say that again, because of COVID-19, our jobs have become a bit of a challenge, right? Reaching out to women who may be still living with the abuser. We've had to be creative in how we still support them, whether it be through Zoom like this, phone calls, text messages, waiting for partners to leave, or if the women can go for a walk. So we've still, during COVID-19, continued serving women and women who have been exposed to domestic violence. So within the outreach program, there are different roles. There's different what we call special assignments. So I'm in a special assignment and I work out of Family and Children's Services. So I work with women that are direct referrals from Family and Children's Services. So I work right out of their office. And within our shelter, I should also mention, we have an F&CS worker that stays at both of our shelter to work with the women there. So the goal of it is so that we don't work in our silos. We know that women who have experienced domestic violence have a lot of issues, and a collaborative approach works much better than a single approach. So my job is different in the fact that I might go out on what Family and Children's Services call a rapid call, a quick call, an emergency. Somebody has to go out right away. I may go out if there's a domestic violence issue in the call, and I may go out right with the worker. So we do that quite often. And then we continue to wrap around that woman together, and children, of course, to figure out what their needs are and to help them. So I will also do some consulting with family and children services workers. Maybe they don't have consent from the women to share information with me, but they may want some information on domestic violence or where to go or services that are provided. So I'll do that as well. We also have a program called ECIP. It's Early Couples Intervention Program, and that we've partnered with Victim Services to work with couples that maybe there's been some police involvement, but that hasn't led to charges. But we've noticed that there's 3 or 4 calls that are coming in. So a worker from Victim Services and an outreach worker will go out to those calls. And some of those referrals are also coming from me, from Family and Children's Services. So we wouldn't go out on any kind of high risk, serious call when there's been strangulation or anything like that. It would have to be on the lower level of the spectrum. And in those meetings, what we would talk with the couple about, they may be separated, they may do some work together, but about, you don't want to become part of this system, especially the police system. It's difficult, right? So we try safety plan and talk about strategies that they can work with to de-escalate. So Christina's located out of the Horizon in the Domestic Violence Project, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit more about that.
So Horizon has a family violence project. Family Violence Project consists of several agencies, the Waterloo Regional Domestic Violence Police, their Waterloo Regional Police Victim Services. They have the Victim Witness Assistance Program, which is through the Crown's office. They have Family and Children's Services, the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence Treatment Center, ourselves, Women's Crisis Services, counseling agency as well through Horizon. And the main focus there, on place there Monday through Friday, is to provide assistance with the police, the domestic violence police, receive referrals when there has been charges. And my priority is to call the victims that have been involved, victim of domestic violence, and talk to them primarily around services support that they might need during that time. Sometimes it could just be a very quick call to let them know what services are out there, kind of planting that seed a little bit in terms of some of the services that are available to her. I may be of assistance to the police if there is something happening and there is a woman there that might need some shelter support. Perhaps they're locating the accused and she's not safe with the children to go home. So I would help in facilitating her into the shelter, help liaison with getting her into some counseling. Basically all the agencies that are there, we kind of want to do it where it's a warm pass off to other agencies there. While she's there in the building, all those connections can be made and faces that she can see and feel more comfortable with.
Okay. Is there any questions about the services that we provide or about what we do? No, perfect. Okay. So we're going to go on.
We thought it was a good idea just to put in some stats here. These are stats from Canada. 1 in 5 women experience a form of violence from an intimate partner. Some of the stats that we have here in our Waterloo region, as Lisa talked about, we have 272 total number of women who stayed in both the shelters each year on average. 196 total number of children and youth who have stayed in the shelters. We've had 1,080 number of women who we served annually through the outreach program. There has been 16 number of times that the Waterloo Regional Police respond to calls of domestic violence each day on average. 9 number of calls that we receive through the crisis line. We do have a 24-hour crisis line in both shelters, and that is primarily the source of how we get families safe, how we get women and children into the shelter. And just thinking again in terms of the COVID and how the COVID has impacted, we thought it was a good stat to throw in that last month, the Waterloo Regional Police laid 371 domestic violence charges, which has been an increase over their stat from last year, this time in last year as well.
And everybody was kind of expecting this, but it's a really scary thought in our community that the domestic violence is rising at that kind of pace. And we also have to remember those are only reported cases. So there's many women, most women don't call the police, to be honest with you. So the numbers are much higher than that. So stats on domestic violence in Canada, a woman is killed every 6 days in Canada, most often killed by people they know or their partners. Of the 433 homicide victims in Ontario, 349 of them were adult females and 40% of them were children. So that means 81% were females and 9% were children. Of the 110 perpetrator deaths, 107, which is 97%, were adult males. So the average age of a homicide victim in Canada is 38.2 years old. So again, those are some scary statistics. It just makes you think, like, people always can think in their minds, you know, it's not somebody they know, but often it can be your neighbor, your friend, and you may not even know what's going on in their home.
Mm-hmm. And then again, just going back to what Lisa said, these are the stats that we know because, you know, the police keep record in terms of charges. Crisis line, we can keep track and stats of women who come into the shelter, women who have been serviced through outreach, but there are a number of women that are not being serviced. A number of times that women are not able to call. We have often a lot of women that English is not their first language. And so making that call and reaching out is just not something that they can do at this time.
And once they do reach out, if English is their second language, we do have interpreters at our fingertips, but it's about making that first call, or they may not even know about the services.
So we just thought it was a good idea to put out here that in Ontario, this has been adapted through the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee. So every year, the Death Review Committee, which is a multidisciplinary advisory committee that's made up of experts that review domestic violence related deaths, they go through the entire file. They look at what's happened, what didn't happen, and they look at any of the preventable tips. They provide recommendations. One of the things that we do know is that domestic violence is one of those that are predictable and preventable. And that is something that the Domestic Violence Death Review has told us this over and over again. So out of those files and out of those reviews, the purpose is then to look at some of these files and see where has there been gaps that have been missing. So for example, there about 2016, there was a number of deaths for elderly women. And they looked at the fact that there was a number of agencies, personal support workers, other agencies that were coming to the home and weren't able to detect that there was neglect and there was abuse happening. So out of that, we've come up with doing a lot of training, Lisa and I, with the St. Louis Personal Support Workers Program, and we go in there and talk about those signs. If you're not aware and you're not sure, then chances are you're not going to be recognizing that. So they decided to put in, it was over about 30 recommendations on what could have happened. And some, training, for instance, from the personal support worker was a huge factor that was listed in there. Other trainings that have come forward, really some really important information. I know that with the shelters, get the review every year and look over that and see where there's gaps and see if there's programs or anything else that we can implement to reach out to. Ontario, this has been adapted through the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee. So every year, the Death Review Committee, which is a multidisciplinary advisory committee that's made up of experts that review domestic violence related deaths, they go through the entire file. They look at what's happened, what didn't happen, and they look at any of the preventable tips. They provide recommendations. One of the things that we do know is that domestic violence is one of those that are predictable and preventable. And that is something that the Domestic Violence Death Review has told us this over and over again. So out of those files and out of those reviews, the purpose is then to look at some of these files and see where has there been gaps that have been missing. So for example, about 2016, there was a number of deaths for elderly women. And they looked at the fact that there was a number of agencies, personal support workers, other agencies that were coming to the home and weren't able to detect that there was neglect and there was abuse happening. So out of that, we've come up with doing a lot of training, Lisa and I, with the St. Louis Personal Support Workers Program. And we go in there and talk about those signs. If you're not aware and you're not sure, then chances are you're not going to be recognizing that. So they decided to put in, it was over about 30 recommendations on what could have happened. And some, training, for instance, from the personal support worker was a huge factor that was listed in there. Other trainings that have come forward, really some really important information. I know that with the shelters, get the review every year and look over that and see where there's gaps and see if there's programs or anything else that we can implement to reach out to.
The goal of these things is not to place blame, but it's for us all that are in this profession to learn from and to grow from.
Out of the 329 cases, there were 470 deaths. Out of these cases reviewed, 66 of them were homicides, 34% were homicide-suicides. Approximately 71 of all cases reviewed from 2003 to 2018 involved a couple where there was a history of domestic violence, and 67 of the cases involved were couples with an actual or pending separation. Lisa talked a little bit about a risk assessment. That is part of what we do with safety planning. Understanding safety planning and understanding the risk is also asking the right questions. So out of this death review committee, they were able to find some common themes throughout the cases. And there is a series of about 40 questions that we do ask each woman that we do work with. And out of those gets to sort of determine what level of risk that she might be at. At that point, we're able to gauge a little bit more and tailor that safety plan to those needs.
And what we have learned is a woman's greatest risk time to be seriously harmed or even murdered is right before she leaves, up until about 2 years after she leaves. And that's because the domestic violence, many people think that it's solely about anger. The person is angry at the other person. But in fact, it's about controlling another individual. The next part we're going to talk about is what is emotional, verbal, and psychological abuse, right? So emotional abuse is any kind of abuse that is emotional rather than physical in nature. It can include anything from verbal abuse and constant criticism to more subtle tactics such as intimidation, manipulation, and a refusal to ever be pleased. So this is a list coming up about different types of and examples of emotional abuse. This is a small list. It's not the entirety of what makes up emotional abuse, but making unilateral decisions. So I'm going to go buy a car. I'm not even going to consult with my partner. I'm going to tell my child that they can go out on a play date. I'm not going to consult with my partner. Just thinking that maybe the person runs the household. Making her feel unstable. So maybe kind of questioning her all the time about decisions she does make, or saying, I think you heard that wrong, kind of minimizing whatever she's feeling. Threatening to tell her secrets. So there could be things that maybe she doesn't want other family members to know or friends to know, and the person is threatening to tell her, to kind of out her. And that is a form of control, right? Giving her the silent treatment, that's another one. People kind of think it's verbal or emotional abuse that it always has to kind of be loud in nature, but that's in fact not true. So maybe the person gets mad and ices you out for a week. ghosts you for a week. Like, that is a form of emotional abuse. Using the children. So that can be done in many ways. It could be maybe getting the children to participate in jokes about mom, or telling the children to pass messages, or saying, hey, feel free to leave this relationship, but don't you think you're taking the children, right? That's a big one. Or if you do take the children, I'm going to call the police and I'm going to tell them that you've kidnapped the children. That's a big one that's used very often. From what I've noticed, many women think that if they take the children and go to a place of safety, that they're going to get charged with kidnapping, right? So it takes some education to that woman to let her know that's not going to happen. In fact, you feel free to call the police, let them know you're in a safe place. Maybe your partner's going to call and say this, but your children and you are fine.
Yeah, we see that in particular with women who maybe stay-at-home moms, and what would happen, what would it look like for them to leave when their partners are pretty much bringing in all of the income, and convincing the stay-at-home mom that she's going to lose the children because she can't support them financially. And what we hear from women time and time again is they're not going to go without their children. And we see that even with women with pets, very dear, very close to them, but perhaps the income, they don't have any income, and how are they going to be able to support them as well?
Belittling their accomplishments. So maybe she comes home from a day at work or something really good happened, and her partner says, well, that's not a big deal. This happened to me. To make her feel like her accomplishments are important. Lecturing her, like basically kind of trying to tell her what she needs to do, or this is the right way to do things. Maybe she's trying to cook dinner and her partner's saying she's not cutting the carrots properly. It can be something as simple as that, but it tends to be more constant. Jealousy. So this happens in many relationships, and sometimes young people think that that's actually a form of love, that oh, look, he's jealous when I talk to my friend Tommy, so that means he loves me. So a lot of education with our youth takes place, and we tell them that jealousy is actually can be a form of control.
Lisa and I used to run a youth group, an outreach child and youth group, and we would go into the health class, and it would be amazing to hear the young girls when they'd say, well, he said he would die for me. He's threatening to hurt himself if I ever left. That is true love. And it really needs to kind of start at such a young age to understand that that's actually a form of that control. And it's not love. That's not what love looks like. That's a way to control you, to make you feel as if you can't leave because you are now responsible for his life.
And also another form of emotional abuse is keeping her isolated. And that can take place in many forms. It doesn't have to be you can't see this person, but it could be more subtle and like, we don't get to spend much time together. You should stay home with me. Or whenever you see that person, your behavior changes a bit. We should just spend time together. So the goal of this is sometimes so that the woman doesn't have a person to reach out to anymore, right? So, and again, that enables her partner to become more controlling and have more control of her, the less people she has in her life. Withholding affection, that's pretty self-explanatory. That often happens. Actively working to turn others against her. So, maybe you're having a conversation and he says, well, the neighbors think that you snap too much at me or you don't treat me well, right? So again, getting people on side with him, and some of that information can be true, but many times it may not even be true. He's just making it up again to gain more control.
We see this in particular for a lot of women who are fairly new to Canada. Having to leave a partner could also mean having to leave your community. And so it could be a huge decision, and, perhaps for religious reasons or cultural reasons, to leave a spouse isn't an option. And so really women are forced to have to sort of, understand that it is essentially being turned away from your own community.
Yeah. Minimizing the abusive behavior, so not taking responsibility, saying it's not that bad, or maybe blaming her for the abusive behavior. You know, if you wouldn't have talked back, or if you wouldn't have embarrassed me, this wouldn't have happened. And using guilt, you know, and that can be with some of the suicidal threats too, right? You know, if I said I was sorry, if you leave, I can't live without you, I love you. So these are some of the examples of emotional abuse for sure, but these are also some of the barriers that make it more difficult for women to leave abusive relationships.
Any questions at all? Anything to add?
Ladies, you're doing just great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's so insightful. Keep going.
So we talked about some verbal abuse, you know, in terms of name calling. We hear this a lot. You know, once accused or perpetrators, you know, people who use power and control, once they are successful with making their partner's self-worth next to nothing, it is essentially just debilitating, and it is not, you know, once you've taken that ability for her to try to even consider to leave because she doesn't feel she's worth it, she doesn't feel like nobody else would want her, she should be so lucky that he or her partner is even you know, with her, she won't get custody. Once you have no self-worth, you're not going to attempt to even, you know, consider to even leave or look for, you know, a new life. Screaming at her, putting her family and friends down, essentially just is severing those ties, severing the support. Support is a partner feeling really insecure when somebody does have supports. It could be a lifeline. It could be somebody who's convincing you or talking to you about your partner's behavior. So the more they can isolate you and the more that they can sever those ties, the more that they can have you under that control. Giving her direct orders, you know, we always say to women, you know, you love your partner, we understand you love your partner, but this is not a healthy relationship. This is not what this healthy relationship should look like. Threatening to harm her and or the children or pets, we have that quite often. You know, no woman wants to leave without their children. We've had women who have quit jobs because they were fearful, because they felt that the children would be neglected or their needs would not be met. Again, you know, without the financial support behind her as well, then she becomes even more trapped.
Now we'll just give you some examples of a psychological abuse. The use of intimidation, that can be, again, very subtle, but it can also be very overt. Tracking her whereabouts, we're seeing that a lot more in the last few years than I think that we ever had. Now that most people have phones, computers, even computers in their car, right? Navigation systems. So we see a lot of women being tracked, and sometimes there's invisible apps on their phone that they don't even know that are there. So I had a woman that all of her calls, not when she was answering them or when she was not, was going to her partner's computer. So he would literally see where she is, and on Google Maps with her email account, he could track exactly where she was going at all times. So he seemed to know all this information. So it was really challenging for her to be able to leave him because there were devices kind of everywhere. So it's something that, you know, is constantly evolving as well. So as workers, we have to try our best to keep up with technology and the changes in our society, and with social media too, right? Because social media can also be a problem for people in abusive behaviors, right? It's whether they're hacking maybe into their emails, their Facebook, their Instagram, their Snapchat. That happens frequently, sending messages without her knowledge, deleting things, or simply seeing what she's doing. Another form of psychological abuse is convincing her that it's her fault. So, and if you continue to tell somebody something, it tends to resonate. So it takes time to undo some of that damage. So she might think that, well, if she wouldn't have talked back, if she was more quieter, if she would have dressed nicer, then he would have been happier, and this wouldn't have happened. Again, we talked a bit about like the digital spying. Again, there's also all kinds of small cameras that can be put in houses and cars, so they can see and hear what's going on. Threatening behavior. So simply threatening her again. You can leave, the kids can't leave, or if you leave, I'm going to ruin your stuff, or I'm going to tell your secrets, that type of thing. Convincing her that she's the abuser. So maybe she's raised her voice or fought back, and then this gives him the little bit. He'll say, well, see, it's your fault. You yelled at me. You're abusive. You called me a name, right? So then often people can start to believe that in fact they're the ones that are the abusers.
We've seen a lot of this in the last few years where police are called and police look at who this primary aggressor is. And it is not uncommon, as Lisa said, where, you know, after many years of abuse, you know, or fighting back or defending herself, that, you know, there was an accidental scratch on the face, or her ring accidentally scratched the face. And so when police are called, you know, they can be very convincing that she looks like this, you know, aggressor, that she attacked him. And we've seen a lot of women that have now been charged and now going through the system and going through the court system, making them feel like they're this, you know, horrible person, that they now have abused their partner. And really, it's just a little glimpse of when they walked in, when the police determined what was happening, but that's not the entire picture as to what's happened in that relationship.
Trivializing her feelings, like we talked about, that she's kind of not important, that, you know, it just doesn't matter. And again, we talked about the isolation on a previous slide, just attempting to separate her from her family and friends, right? The less people she has for support, the more likely she is going to stay in that abusive relationship.
Any questions about that? No.
Oh, do you want me to go? So some of the precursors to domestic violence are the partner controls the money. So the abusive person controls the money. We've seen it that sometimes the victim does not even own her own bank card. So she has no access to money at all. Sometimes maybe she gets an allowance from her partner or no money at all. So we've had women that have not even been able to afforded the right for personal hygiene products. So that's really sad and tough. Sabotages relationships with family and friends, and maybe they're doing that by lying to the family and friends about her, spreading rumors, or maybe he is talking to her and saying, you see, like I said before, like every time you go out to see your mom, you come back and you're nasty and mean to me. She just causes problems in our relationship. She has too many opinions. We'd be happy if she wasn't around. That type of thing. Subtle put downs or claims, just joking. So, you know, you're in a crowd of people at a restaurant and, you know, he makes a funny crack about his partner. Everybody else is laughing, but it's something that hurts your feelings. So inside you kind of know, like, it's not right? But everybody else is laughing, so you stay silent about it.
Yeah, it's a way to escape that responsibility by saying this is just a joke. It's just a joke, right?
Makes excuses for his behavior, maybe claiming that she made him do it again. She made him angry. She talked back, or she embarrassed him, or maybe he just had a bad day at work, or, you know, he had a rough childhood. You know, all those types of excuses, again, make it harder for women to leave, but also are warning signs when you start to hear some of these things. Obsessive behavior by the perpetrator. Again, that can be like that jealousy thing. You know, he always wants to be around her. You know, she's not allowed to talk to any kind of men. Accuses her of sleeping with other people. That type of thing.
Yeah, we see that with frequent texting, frequent calls, you know, constantly showing up at workplaces, or, you know, just outings. You know, when people thrive on control, and suddenly they feel like they've lost that control because spouses, you know, women have left or are planning to leave, is when there could be a very dangerous time, just as we talked about in terms of that DVD. This in particular, indicator is flagged really high during our risk assessment is those obsessive behaviors.
Yeah, that the perpetrator is depressed, right? And that again is another thing on a risk assessment if he's been diagnosed with any kind of depression. But not to say, I should clarify this, that everybody who's depressed is abusive, because that in fact is not true. Obsessive behavior by the partner, we've done prior threats to attempt to commit suicide. So this is another thing that's on our risk assessment. So often the threat of suicide is a means of control. Not always. We can never guarantee that somebody's not going to die by suicide. However, it typically happens when a woman is planning on leaving the relationship. If you go, I can't live without you, I'll kill myself. And then she tends to feel that guilt or responsibility, so tends to stay.
What would that look like for their children, right?
Yeah.
To lose their father, or to think that, you know, she feels that she's to blame for that. If she just stayed, then he wouldn't have done that, and therefore the children would have their father.
So another kind of warning sign, and what we always try and talk to women about too, is that just that fear that you have, and there may not be a reason for it, that gut instinct in your tummy that kind of something feels not right. So we try to teach women to listen to that, because that may be saying that something's not safe in their environment right now, right? So you don't have to have a reason to feel fear or that something's not right. We ask them to try and just listen to that instinct. So also a victim's vulnerability. So when we're talking about maybe somebody that English is not their first language, right? That makes them more susceptible. And maybe they come from a culture back home that some of these things are okay, and it's been taught to them growing up, so they don't know that it's not okay for them to be physically harmed or emotionally harmed.
We see that as well with, you know, stay-at-home moms, you know, income, lack of income,
Poverty.
Yeah, food insecurities. You know, there's, you know, if women have, you know, drug and alcohol issues or mental health issues as well, that's been compounded. You know, these are things that really makes the woman more vulnerable and feel like they're unable to leave.
But, and as we say this though, abuse does happen in all cultures, all socioeconomic backgrounds.
Yeah.
It can be anybody. Perpetrator displayed like the sexual jealousy. We've talked about that quite a bit. Prior threats to kill the victim, even if it's kind of in jest. Often women don't think that men will follow through, or their partners will follow through. That, you know, we try to teach them that it's still a threat and it's not okay. We talked about the excessive alcohol and drug use. So as we say that, alcohol does not cause domestic violence, nor does drug use, but it can definitely impact the severity of it. Unemployment, again, we're talking about like the socioeconomic issues, and a history of violence outside the family. So that's another item that's on our assessment, because sometimes abuse just happens between closed doors, but other times they can maybe be violent within their community, at work, in bars, at restaurants, with friends, at parties, that type of thing.
Christina, there's a couple of comments in the chat.
Okay.
One is, can you share any of the questions from the DBDRC?
So the DBDRC, as I said, was developed by the Death Review Committee. The Death Review Committee of Ontario, they're all over different provinces as well, but the one we use is from Ontario, that has seen patterns in cases that they have reviewed. A couple of them we talked about, such as sexual jealousy is on there, the victim's intuitive sense of fear. We looked at obsessive behavior from the perpetrator. We looked at violence outside of the home, victims' vulnerability. So there are about 40 questions that we ask, and we're looking at, is it present, is it absent, or is it unknown? And we try to gather as much and try to elicit as much information that the woman may have. And we look at then out of those 40 questions, where on the scale does she rank in terms of potentially high risk violence to her? We've seen cases that have been, 25, 30 plus that they have experienced from their partners. And so we're going to look at that, very serious, but very differently as well in terms of, is she coming to the shelter? We can pull a high risk meeting that comprises of police, perhaps probation if needed, victim services comes together, women's crisis services come. And the purpose of that is for everybody to come together and look at pieces of that safety plan that we can tie up those loose ends to ensure that there's a really solid safety plan. We can look at children's schools and flagging their schools. Sometimes we've pulled the school officials in, teachers. We've done safety plans for children as well in those schools. So we're looking at the entire family because, as you can see with the DVD, there was quite a high number of children that were also murdered in a lot of these cases as well.
So I'll just go over a few of them. Maybe I'll highlight. We have 14 of the questions better predict lethality of a woman. So they ask about the history outside of the family of violence with the abusive partner, a history of domestic violence. So what they're looking for here is not only with the current partner, but has he been abusive towards ex-partners or anybody else in his family? Again, prior threats to die by suicide, excessive alcohol and drug use, depression, if it's professionally diagnosed, is he unemployed? Is there a new partner in your life? So that's something that we haven't really talked about. Again, this is another high risk time for a woman, even if they've been separated for some time, because sometimes when people separate, the other person may think eventually they're going to come around because they have come in the past. So once the woman starts having a kind of a life of her own or dating a new partner, that again escalates her risk. Has the person ever threatened to kill you? Has he threatened to isolate, or has he isolated you? In the past year, has the violence escalated? So is it becoming more often or more severe? Obsessive behavior displayed by him, and is there a pending separation? Sexual jealousy, and again we talk about that intuitive fear is the next one. So those are like the 14 out of the 40 that better determine a woman's risk to be lethal murdered. However, and I think you probably hear me keep saying about the women, there are men that are victims of domestic violence. Christina and I primarily work with women, and statistically speaking, there are more women that are victims of domestic violence, but it surely does not mean that there are no men or boys that are victims of domestic violence. I should say that because we're kind of schooled still to talk about she and he, and that is not always the case. And also it's sometimes in same-sex relationships as well.
So just in terms of the chat, there's a comment from Carrie that also says there's also the threat of Children's Aid Society often used as a way of making the victims afraid to leave. And then Krista has said, yes, that's a big one. When she was working at the shelter in Brantford, many women calling crisis line would bring that up. And then another comment, we need to empower moms and victims to know that they are being protected by leaving. And then there's a question, do shelters here offer the PAR program?
The shelters don't, but the John Howard Society does. So we do have a PAR program. We have a domestic violence court in this region that often you see the perpetrator going into the courtroom, and once he's leaving or she leaving the courtroom, they go right to do an intake to the PAR program. And our PAR program, we both have a PAR program for women and for men, and they are separated. So
and what does PAR stand for?
Partner Assault Response
Program.
Assault Response, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
PARs, I don't know if there's
no S in it. It's a PAR. So So yes, and if there are criminal charges, most people that are charged have to complete this program.
First, it's looked at as more of a therapeutic, rehabilitation for first-time offenders of domestic violence. Used to be a 16-week intensive program. It's been cut down to 12. As I said, it's once a week. John Howard runs the males, and Family Counseling Center in Cambridge runs the females as well. So the hope is that once they're going through the court system and they've done about 80 to 90% of participation and completion, then at that point that they'll resolve their criminal. The purpose is to hope that there's going to be better ways to deal with what's happening, learn skills, problem solving, conflict resolution, but understanding how your partner felt, and what that looks like, the impact that it has on children as well, so that it could prevent from re-offending again.
Okay, and there's one more question. So how about if the women are not telling the truth? There are 2 cases in my neighborhood where the men were not violent.
Okay, well, I guess that there is a percentage that don't tell the truth. I would not say it's a high percentages at all. There's not much to gain from lying about it, and sometimes maybe, and I don't know the situation at all, but in your neighborhood maybe you're not seeing what's happened also behind closed doors. I don't know. There is a percentage, I guess, of people that lie about any crime, but it's definitely not a high percentage at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that answer your question, Olga?
It's Rabina.
Oh, Rabina, sorry.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, perfect. We are not seeing all the names on our screen so that we can see the PowerPoint at the same time. So sorry about messing up.
So
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. We thought it would be a great idea to look at the power and control wheel. This wheel has been around for so long. It's something that we give out to a lot of women when we meet with them, just to kind of get them to understand that, oftentimes in the cycle of violence, it is about power and control. It's about gaining that power and control over your spouse. And just as we talked about with a lot of the precursors, but also in terms of the examples that we gave, it kind of breaks it down a little bit more, and it gives it as a visual for women that we meet with. And it's amazing when we meet with women that say, oh my gosh, that is exactly what is happening, and so, again, just looking at that and seeing the differences, but all of those pieces, and maybe for their cycle, using isolation is a huge, half of that, or using privilege is, takes up the other half. So some of those things could look a little bit differently, but essentially all of this is a means to exert that power and control. So Lisa and I thought, if you can see that on the screen, can everybody see that? That, now that we've sort of talked about those examples, talked about the precursors, we did a case scenario here. And we thought if you can just take a moment to read and see if anything that kind of jumps out at you, that if this was you in your situation, that you were sitting there and you were overhearing that, what are some of the things that you're thinking? Case study. Sally is a 38-year-old married woman with 2 young children. She's at the hair salon and you overhear her talking to the stylist. She shares that she is needing a new look and is looking old and has let herself go. Sally wanted to dye her hair blonde to make her husband more attracted to her. She has put on a few pounds and she has been desperately trying to take off or risk her husband leaving her. She was heard calling herself ugly and worthless and is an embarrassment to the family. After some time at the hair salon, Sally seemed very anxious to get home to her husband. She was overheard saying that if she doesn't get home in the next 20 minutes, she has stated, who knows what he would do to me. So what are some of the things, if you were listening to that, would that be something that would kind of jump out at you? Would you, anything that sort of resonates.
What are some of the red flags you might see?
Well, I'd feel worried for Sally, for sure.
Yeah, for
But if
sure.
if
sure.
is it appropriate to say something,
just
I would not know.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be sort of, you know, that proper time.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like a lot of them are, you know, concerns, like, and the ones about, you know, the hair and all those other things are flags around, you know, maybe someone's self-esteem and things like that. But I think when someone is direct to saying something like, who knows what he'll do to me?
Absolutely.
At least invites a question, you know, to go, well, what do you mean by that? When you say what he'll do to you, what are we talking about? Or just something, you know, often think sometimes if people say something directly, it's almost like a little bit of an invitation, maybe to ask something, you know, and then see how they respond, at least to know that at least we've asked the question. Yeah, I mean, that's a red flag, right?
Well, we have a program in this region called Cut It Out, because what we do know, a lot of women that go to salons and get their hair done, they do talk to their hair stylists or their estheticians or whatever, and they don't know anything about domestic violence, right? So we have a program that's voluntary for hairdressers and stylists to come in, and they learn about domestic violence. So it was quite successful before COVID started, and we had like whole salon staff come in at one time to learn, and we've also went to the a hairstyling school.
So because I think it's the same with suicide and things like that. People just don't know how to ask the question or what to say. And you're right, especially hair salons, right? They'd hear all sorts of things. So that's really good.
Yeah. One of the things in the Domestic Violence Death Review Committee, it's the May Isles case, was a pivotal point with the Domestic Violence Death Committee, because she did, when they reviewed the case, confided in her hairdresser many times and said that she thought he was going to kill her.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
And in fact, he did. And so after a few years of that, we, as some shelters, came around with some curriculum with a program, as Lisa was talking, that's called Cut It Out. And so our agency has sort of taken that curriculum on. And like she said, Lisa said, we're now doing a lot of training with the hair salons, spas, massage therapists, because in fact, with the May Isles case, that's exactly what happened. The Death Review Committee said, you know, it's not just for social work backgrounds, but really any professionals that might have or might be spending time should be recognizing those signs of domestic violence.
Christina, there's a couple of things in the chat.
Sorry, Suzanne, were you going to say something?
I was just asking, what would you do if you heard that?
As a worker, what would I do if I was in the salon at the time, or if I was the hairdresser? Because it's a very different response.
I guess, yeah, I guess that's a great.
So if I was, what they're trying to teach in the Cut It Out program is how to be supportive and empathetic and non-judgmental to people, right? Because Suzanne, what you said was very accurate. You may not have been ready, right? So when I work with a woman, whatever disclosures she makes, I don't tell her what she has to do. I'm supportive. I build the relationship with her, you know, and I use who I am as an authentic person. I use humor. I'm empathetic. I really care. This is my passion. So that's what I would do. I would listen to her as a worker, and I would just tell her her options. And like, as you said, you were very afraid of losing your children. So I would also provide some education that in fact won't happen, right? Like it would explain the systems and how they work, right? So, and what I would tell any of my friends, family, neighbors, that if they have a woman that they believe has experienced domestic violence, to be supportive, to have open ears, have an open home, and don't judge them, because it's not up to us when women leave. It's up to them, and they need to be ready. There are barriers. So I would just be open and supportive, and that's what we want, because what the other person wants is to isolate that woman. And in fact, that's not what we want to happen, but that is their goal, because it makes it often easier for him to continue the control and the abuse, and it makes her more fearful to leave because she doesn't have the people around her. So, and I know that families, I've talked to many families in this job as well, and how frustrated they get because they don't understand why women stay. It's much easier to say, you know, why doesn't she just leave? So again, I would just want to be supportive and understanding and authentic with that woman, and be there for maybe when she is ready to leave. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because I get what you said.
Yeah. And I think what I just typed this, I think the whole thing about not being judgmental is so key.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In our slide shortly after the case study, we thought it was really important to talk about that if you did encounter somebody who you believe might be experiencing domestic violence, you know, some things to kind of take into consideration, and what some things not to do as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of what you just mentioned, Suzanne, in that.
And I
Rubina,
think also you have to,
sorry.
I think also you have to get to know the person that you're working with, whether it's your friend or not, because maybe they just need a listening ear right now, and that's it. And that's actually okay, because the more we can get women to talk, the safer they're going to be.
The other thing is to document anytime your friend says anything or you notice anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's a good idea. And we tell women to document, but they may not be at that space. So if other people around them are documenting, it's all the better.
Krista, did you want to state what you said in
So just talking about,
sorry, not Christina, Krista. Krista had typed something in the chat.
Okay. Can you read it?
sorry, we can't see it from here.
Yeah, I was just saying that the training that you were saying that was done at salons and for massage therapists and things like that, I did the same training many years ago in Brantford, and it was really well received by a lot of people in those professions because, like you had said, they basically almost become their therapist from the conversations that they're having at those salons. So I was just happy to hear that it's something that's actually happening here too, because I don't know anything about the services that are done here since I'm not in the line of work anymore. So I'm glad to hear that it's something that's still being trained on and that it's being well received in the area as well.
So again, just kind of you know, piggyback a little bit on what we were just discussing with Suzanne. What can someone do if they suspect that someone's experiencing violence? So if you know someone who might be experiencing it, you might feel helpless or clueless about, you know, ways to help out. Don't let the fear of saying something wrong, you know, prevent you from reaching out. Waiting for those perfect words essentially could end up seizing the opportunity. The world for a lot of women, and not all, but for many women experiencing domestic violence can be very lonely, isolating, filled with fear. And sometimes, you know, just being able to let them know that you're there, and whenever they are ready, can provide that, you know, some tremendous relief for them. So looking at some tips to consider, you know, again, making time for the individual. Again, just, you know, you really have to use your sort of, you know, assessment and judgment. Do you know this person? Is this somebody that you might just started a job and you're not really sure, you know, a lot about the person? Or are you sort of an acquaintance and you know, do know the person a little bit better? Saying things like, hey, you know, I'm worried about you. I've noticed this. You know, don't force the individual to open up if they're not ready. We often hear families, we get a lot of families, we get a lot of workers, employers calling on our crisis line and saying, how do I support this employee? Or how do I support my sister, you know, my cousin, my friend, you know, my neighbor, something's happening. And they time and time again are saying there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong. And you may get that. And just like we talked about, they're not ready. They're not ready. But just, very simply saying, I'm concerned, I'm here for you. Whenever you are ready, please, at any point, I'm here to listen. I'm here to help you.
And what we have to also remember is that this behavior could be normalized for them, and because they've had to cope in it for so long. So although we may be seeing all of these red flags or signs, for them it could be just their norm. So it's important to keep that in mind. And if you're friends with somebody, to lightly talk about what you've seen, right? Because they may see it in a different light. But when you do that, again, you have to do that without judgment.
So listening without judgment, listen to their feelings, don't force them to leave or make any decisions. They may not, obviously be ready at the water cooler of just standing there. Again, we always just kind of say when we meet women in the outreach program, my job is not to promote separation or divorce. That's not what I'm doing. My job is to sort of just plant that seed a little bit. Let her know the services and resources that are out there. And when ready, I always encourage that they call back, and I may not see them again. So safety planning is important. All the services and resources in our region, are so pivotal, and we have a lot of resources that she might not know about. And 9 out of 10 times I can say months and months later, it could be a year later, we do get that call and say, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I want to talk about this again, or let's talk again. So learn the warning signs. You're all here and it's incredible, and I applaud you for coming, but this is a great step to really know some of those signs, recognize them. When you're seeing things like the self-worth that we just looked at with the case scenario with Sally, when you're looking at her fear, when she degrades herself, she puts herself down, skipping appointments, or things that used to be important are no longer important, isolating themselves for family and friends. These are all things that, we might just say, oh, they're just going through something, but keep that sort of, in your mind a little bit. And just let them know that you're here from them. Let them know that if they need anything, and believe her.
It's really important to believe her and to remind her that it's not her fault. So the more we plant the positive seeds, the more helpful it's going to be for her. And offer to help her in any way that you can. Offer to help find the women's supports, go to an appointment with her if you can. Help her make a call with the shelter, because it could be isolating and it's pretty scary for women to make that step to reach out for help. So the more support and love they have around them, the better and the easier it is. And I know as outreach workers, Christina and I will both meet with friends or family of the victim as well. So, and in fact, when you're doing a safety plan, the more people involved in that plan, it increases her safety. So that is actually really helpful. Although what not to do. Although there is no right or wrong way to help a victim of domestic violence, you want to avoid doing anything that will make the situation worse. So for an example, going in like a bull and confronting the person that's abusive, right? That's not going to be help anything. Telling other people about her situation or telling the person that's abusive what she's saying, that is in fact just going to escalate her risk. So it's really important to just stay supportive of her, and don't bash the person that's abusive. It's okay to talk about the behaviors, because what we do know is that women return quite often. So then if they return and you've participated in the bashing session, she may not reach out to you again. So it's really important, to point out the behavior, but just to keep it away from calling him names or whatever. And don't blame her for anything, right? When she might be blaming herself in conversations, and it's okay to say, hey, that wasn't your fault. Nobody ever has the right to treat you like that you're being treated. And don't underestimate the danger that both the victim and yourself can be in, right? Because as we know, the closer a person gets to leaving the relationship, the higher their risk becomes. And if the person that's abusive feels that they have nothing else to lose, we don't know what they're capable of, even if there's never been physical abuse in the past. So, and you know, question why she is still with her partner. Don't ask that, right? Because again, there's many barriers. So that again just makes her feel bad. Comments like, I would have left a long time ago. The first time he called me that, I would have been gone. Or the first time he hit me, I would have left. We don't know, right? It's like looking through those kind of glass houses kind of mentality. It's really important to understand that there are barriers. Children, the fear of family and children's services, the fear of the police, the fear of getting in trouble or nobody believing them, having nowhere to go. So just keep all these tools in mind when you're if you're ever talking to somebody who has been abused.
Any questions about that or comments?
I just have a comment and a question. First of all, thank you so much for all this information. That's been great and insightful, and for all the work that you do. How do you manage to keep sane and keep distant, managing all these cases hands-on? How do you manage to not take it home with you?
Well, thank you, Olga. Thank you for thinking of
We vent a lot to each other, so that's a good way. And you know what? I have to say that this is my passion. So I do feel some stuff, but I try and let it go before I go home to work. I might take a drive, or I might call like Christina, another colleague, and talk about how I'm feeling and what's going on. And I try for the most part to shut it off when I get home. But again, when you're talking about women's safety, it is sometimes a challenge, but it's really important to know when you need a break as well. So this work can be draining at times. So it's important to say, hey, you know what, I need to take a day off, and that's okay.
And I think just focusing on the positives. So, if I met with somebody, oftentimes even the first time, you'll just see that sense, a little bit of relief going, wow, I didn't know these services exist. I didn't realize that this couldn't happen. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And, that's just so valuable. If we do get the privilege to work, with the woman, with a safe exit strategy, helping them with the resources, helping them with housing. We do home visits, and we get to see them in their own space and free from violence, and their home that they call home with the children. And that's what I focus on is that.
There's so many success stories, and the success doesn't necessarily mean leaving their partners. So
thank you. Maybe just one more question. From your experience, the women you service in your shelters, how often do they return to the abusive relationship? Does it happen that, they come to your shelter, but then they have to return?
Yeah, it does. I would say there's quite a bit. Like I believe it takes about, from what our some stats show, that it's about 8 times that a woman successfully leaves an abusive partner. We do see women that return after the shelter, maybe after a couple of days, maybe even after a couple of weeks. And we've also had women who, have found a safe place and they've returned as well. That doesn't mean that that's, a fail. That doesn't, that's not something that we look at. However, they know the resources, they know the services that are out there. And what we find are women will then be able to, contact us again if they need to. And that's the important thing, is when they do.
I think it's really important. I know on the first session, what I always do is I talk to the women about that, and that if they return, there's no judgment from me. They can call me in 6, 7 months, a year down the road, and I'm okay with it. I'm not going to ever say I told you so, or you should have done it this way. And more often than not, as Christina said before, we do get women that call us again, right? And she just wasn't ready at that time. That's all. So here's
Thanks
a list.
again.
Oh, yeah. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, I had a quick question. I think I love what you said about, I think you said it right at the beginning, about it's their journey and working with someone wherever they're at, which is just so, powerful. It was one thing for me to do that with clients. But then when it was my own sister, of course, I wanted to scream, get out, run, leave. But, that's the worst thing to do because that's what all her friends had done and everyone else. So then they would feel even more isolated. So I think that's so powerful and such a good reminder to journey with them. What are your thoughts on where someone then finds themselves back in a similar relationship? So they haven't gone back to that abusive partner, that, they've gone through, like you said, the biggest thing you can give someone is education. So they go, oh, wow. So is that what a healthy relationship looks like? So they've sort of, in theory, learned it, but then they find themselves back in a similar one. What's your thoughts to that and how that happens?
Well, it happens, right? So what the goal would be is that people that are abusive tend to look for very vulnerable people, right? And that's just the way it is, right? And it's like they have this kind of radar on that they can find who's vulnerable. So my suggestion to women is always to wait some time before they start to date, deal with maybe the family court issues, deal, your self-esteem, learn some of the warning signs. But does it happen? Honestly, Steve, it does. It happens, right? So sometimes I've had women that call me with their second partner but they've called a lot sooner. So again, to me, that's a win, right? Like they've noticed these signs much earlier on than they did last time. So all we can do is continue supporting and planting the seed.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
So we have some resources up here for those who are in the region. Again, if you wanted a copy of it, we can certainly give that to Julie to distribute. But we have a lot of the resources here that we use that we tend to give out to women. Of course, our shelters, any of the Family Violence Project, social services, mental health counseling, the John Howard Society, Sexual Assault Center. You're welcome to, as I said, we'll give that to Julie if anyone's interested and just getting a copy of those resources. Any last comments or thoughts of just trying to be vigilant with the time? I can't believe we went almost 2 hours. I didn't think we had enough with our presentation.
Yeah, we were a bit worried.
You did a great job.
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing.
Great job, ladies. Just one last comment. I hope that on this list of resources, the organization Shelter Movers, who helps women to move to a shelter or safe place, will appear soon. And I guess you're already in contact with the founders of our organization. Thank you.
I'm writing it down. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Christina and Lisa, not only for putting together an amazing presentation, but also for being brave enough to be our Porch Chat guinea pigs. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who participated. It was really great to have people from all over, and I mean all over, even Australia, to come and join us, so that's pretty amazing. And as mentioned, the Porch Chat is it's part of a series of chats of related information on the Keep Families Safe campaign. To find out more about that campaign, you can go out onto our website on preventioncrime.ca. And yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye.